Hey there, everybody, welcome back to the third video in the Phase Plant series. At the time of recording this video, it's about 35 to 36 degrees Celsius here in the Netherlands. So you guys have to do this video without my webcam because I'm literally sitting shirtless, sweating my ass off making this video. But we're gonna get into the third video in the Phase Plant series, and this one is gonna be all about the effects. Let's get to it. So here we are, I'm on the Kilohearts website and this is the Phase Plant product page. I want to show you the page here because there are a couple of different effect bundles when you buy Phase Plant that you can choose from. And depending on which bundle you buy, you get a whole bunch of different effects. So I want to talk about these effects in this video. And I'm actually going to go through the effects in terms of the bundles as well. So the bundles are, there's 4 bundles. Technically there's 3 bundles and then there's one additional one which is a subscription model. So the cheapest bundle is the free bundle. That bundle includes a couple of different effects and basically you get it when you buy just Phase Plant. Then you have the starter toolbox which contains a couple of more effects, and then we have the professional toolbox which contains almost all the effects, and then finally you've got the subscription which is also called the ultimate toolbox, and that pretty much contains everything that Kilohearts makes. So you can see the prices right here. Phase Plant by itself costs 169 euros. Then if we get the starter toolbox together with it, you'll be up to 199. If we get it together with the professional toolbox, you are up to 349. And then finally the subscription model would cost you 9.99 a month. And with that you will get basically everything that they make. So that's it, and we're gonna go through these bundles. So let's hop back into Ableton, let's open up Phase Plant and let's get started. So here we are, I've got Phase Plant open. I prepared a little bit of stuff here. I have 3 different groups set up with 3 different sounds that I can use to showcase what these effects do. So the first sound is kinda just like a Reese bass. So a very simple Reese bass right there. Then we have the second group, which contains a different sound. This is more like a timpani kind of sound. So that's more like a percussive drum sound. And then finally I have a similar sound, except it sounds slightly different because this one is a brass hit. And I'm gonna use those to demonstrate what this plugin does. So let's get to it. So the effects, you load them up right here. So you have 3 different effects lanes. You can see it as well right now, very faintly in the background it says effects right here. So if you click anywhere here, you will get the effects window. So these are called snap-ins. That's how they call them. Snap-ins are basically effect plugins. They are their own separate VST plugins. You get them as VST plugins as well, so you don't have to use them inside of Phase Plant, but you can use them on pretty much any track that you're working on. And you can also use them in the other plugins that Kilohearts makes. So they're not just specifically made for Phase Plant. Kilohearts actually has a bunch of different plugins. One is for like multi-band frequency splitting, like kind of like what Ableton Racks would do, but then you can use their snap-ins within that plugin as well. And they have a couple of different plugins, so definitely check out the website if you are interested in any of those kind of things. So let's have a little look at the first bundle. The first bundle, the free bundle, that you can basically download for free when you get Phase Plant, contains a couple of different effects. It contains a 3-band EQ, a chorus, a delay, a gain device, a limiter, and a stereo device. So let's look at those first, starting with the 3-band EQ. So let's open up the Reese bass. And this is the Reese bass. And I have the 3-band EQ right here. So if I press a note and then start playing with these, you can kind of see what happens. So let's also set up some legato here so I can play overlapping notes. That would be really cool. So now I've basically removed all of the mid frequencies here, and I've boosted the low end and boosted the high end. Now we can also play around with these, so you can also change the bands itself. It's a little bit of a small window. Maybe it would be nice to have like an additional thing that would open this up and give you a little bit of a bigger window. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. Every one of the effects also has this, by the way. This would open up stuff like saving the presets. So you can actually save presets for all of the effects here, and you can load them by this little window here. So if you just click that triangle, it opens that additional window. And there's actually also a randomize button, so you can completely randomize the preset, which is also very cool, actually. I'm a big fan of randomizers, and seeing that they've included stuff like that, even within an EQ, like... I mean, it's a 3-band EQ, so there's not gonna be that much going on anyway. And the bands are very limited, because the high band is always going to be a high shelf, the low band is always going to be a low shelf, and the mid band is always going to be a bell curve. So there's not that much options possible, and by just clicking the randomize button, you kinda get a different tonal balance. You're kind of changing the balance of the frequencies on the fly. So you can actually, if you're not sure what kind of balance you want to go for, you can just have this sound playing while your track is playing and just clicking that randomize button a couple of times until you find something that you like. So really cool. And they've actually also have options to create folders in the preset window. Now, I haven't saved any presets yet, but that is pretty much what they do. So that's it for the 3-band EQ. It's all pretty self-explanatory, so we're not really gonna go too much into that. We have way too much effects to talk about today, so we need to make a hurry. Let's move on to the next one, which is the chorus effect. So the chorus, obviously, is gonna give us that kind of sound. So the chorus is, well, it's self-explanatory. It creates kind of like a stereo sound. It creates a stereo effect. I'm not entirely sure how it is made under the hood, but I think it's a couple of delays, and these delays create like differences between the left and right channel, and that's why you get that phasing, that stereo kind of effect, and you get some movement as well. So you can see what happens. So we have the delay. That is pretty much, yeah, you have a chorus is a delay, and this will change the time of those delays. So, yeah. That is basically what it sounds like. So it is in fact a delay. It's just the time of the delay itself. But yeah, it has a particular kind of sound. So you can see that's what that does. Now the depth would control how much of it's actually affecting the sound. So that's going to change the range of what the chorus is doing. So it's basically changing the range of the effect. And then you've got the rate, which obviously changes the speed of the effect. I'm really exaggerating it right now so that you guys can properly hear what the rate is doing. You most of the time want to back this depth off and just have it really subtly in the background. So then we have the taps. This is basically how much voices the chorus is going to have. So currently it's set to 2, but if I want a more drastic chorus sound, I can switch that to 3. And we're basically going to get an even more, well, we're going to get more of that chorus effect. It's basically going to add another chorus voice to it. Then we have the spread, which controls how much width we're going to get. So if I want to have a mono chorus, I bring the spread all the way down, and if I want to have a more stereo chorus, I can bring it back up. Now, you can also have a blend in between, so let's say we just want to have a little bit of width to the chorus. That's what we would get. Now, all of these effects, they can be pretty subtle. Now, what I would do, mix this back in, so just maybe 30%, especially on like a re-space. It's always nice to have a little bit of width to it, so this re-space in particular is pretty mono. And just by using a chorus, you can kind of add a little bit of width to it. So that's what the chorus is doing. Again, you've got the same thing here, so you can save presets and you can randomize them, which obviously is going to be very interesting, because if you're not sure what kind of chorus effect you want to do, you just randomize it a couple of times and see what happens. Okay. Let's move on to the next effect, which is going to be the delay. Now for the delay, I'm going to switch to one of these other sounds. Let's do the brass. That's going to be a good one to showcase the delay on. The delay is pretty straightforward. You can either choose between milliseconds or sync to the BPM. So right now it's milliseconds. And let's turn this off. Legato. Okay, so I can add maybe a couple of voices. Now, we can change the time right here at the top, where it actually displays us the time. You've got feedback, which is obviously how long the delay is going to go on. So if I have a high feedback, the delay is going to keep on going. And when I bring the feedback down, it will just stop a lot sooner. Then we've got ping pong, which will, if we turn it on, will make the delay go from left to right. So from our left to right ear. Pretty subtle. In fact, I don't hear much ping pong. Okay, yeah, there is a little bit of ping pong, but it's very subtle. It's not like it's actually going from left and right. It's actually just, it's slightly more on the left and slightly more on the right, from the sound of it at least. If I pat it all the way to the right and turn ping pong on and do this, now it's actually going to go from left to right, I think. Yeah. See? So if you want to exaggerate the ping pong effect, you need to set this all the way up to the right or all the way to the left. I think actually this would now determine which one of the two is going to play first. So if I do this, bring it all the way to the left, I think we're going to get the left delay first. Yeah. And if I bring it all the way to the right, we hear the right delay first and then the left one comes in. Really cool. So that's it for the delay. Let's move on to the next free effect, which is the gain device. Now this one is very straightforward. Where is it? There. That's it. It's literally just a device to change the volume. So yeah, there's not much to talk about here. It's literally just that. It changes the volume. There's even presets for it, or you can make presets for it. I don't know why you would need that, but it's there. That was a quick one. Let's move on to the limiter. The limiter, obviously, let's do this on the timpani sound. The limiter would obviously do, well, what a limiter does. It limits the audio so that it doesn't exceed a particular level. So right now, it's not really doing anything because the level is too low. But I can bring this threshold down to somewhere where that level was peaking. And now everything that goes above our threshold is cut off, or is limited, so basically compressed. It makes it quieter. So if I bring this all the way down, you can hear the transient of the drum sound is kinda becoming quieter. And if I turn it back off, we get that. Now, why is this so cool? We can use this to make sounds a lot louder. So for instance, if I could also just leave it up here, maybe do like -10. It's not hitting the threshold. Let's bump up the input gain. Now it does hit the threshold, and I can change the output gain to match the volume that we had before if I want, or just bump the volume up a bit. So there we have it. And then we have the release. Obviously, that's how long, or that's basically the timing of the limiter. So when it starts compressing the audio down, so when something goes over the threshold, it starts compressing the audio. Basically, this is going to determine how long it will take for the limiter to stop doing any limiting when something goes back down under the threshold again. So if I make this really long and something goes over the threshold, we can see that it just keeps limiting for quite a while. And if I bring this all the way down, we can see that range, you can see that blue part that's moving up and down here is actually moving up and down a lot more erratically, a lot more energetically, I guess. It's just moving about a lot more and not as smooth. And that's because the release is so short. If I make the release a lot longer, it's gonna go down a lot smoother because it has a lot more time that it takes for it to go down. So that's the limiter. Pretty straightforward. This would be really good if you make drums, for instance. It would be great. Or if you have like a really rhythmic kind of patch. That limiter would really help you to control those transients a bit. So, one more effect in the free bundle, and that's the stereo effect. Let's see, we have a mono Reese, or a Reese that is almost mono. Let's use that. And let's add the stereo device. So, if I do that, I'm literally killing the mid frequencies, or the center of the mix. So you should see this in like the stereo spectrum. If I bring this all the way down, we don't hear the mids anymore. And we just hear what happens in the sides. If I want to make it mono, I can do this. Now it's perfectly mono because I brought the sides, the width, all the way down. If I want to make it wider, we can do this. I can actually go up to 600%. Which makes it super wide. But yeah, that's what that is doing. And then you've got a pen, which just offsets the whole thing. So again, very straightforward. There's not much to talk about here. Now I do wonder, how does this sound in mono? Because that's really wide. Let's move to the master track here, because I have a little utility set up. Where is it? Right there. Oh wow. That's literally almost the same as without the effect. We lose a little bit. It's canceling out a little bit of stuff, but it's so subtle. That's a really good stereo device. So bringing this up to 600%, making it 600% wider, still sounds good in mono. That is really good, actually. Most stereo wideness, when you bump them up to like the maximum settings, when you really, you know, like drive them to the max, as soon as you sum it to mono afterwards, it just completely destroys the sound. You get all kinds of phase cancellation and the sound just doesn't sound good in mono anymore. This one, however, we can make something really wide and it still sounds good in mono. That is very, very good. So, that's it for the free bundle, and let's move on. This is the starter toolbox bundle. We are going to talk about the compressor. So the compressor, very straightforward as well. All your default stuff that you would expect on a compressor. Let's go to the timpani sound, because that is a bit more suited for a compressor. Okay. So, compressor threshold, we can bring it down. That's when it will start compressing. So we can really hear it starting to compress stuff now. You've got your attack and release time, so that's just like what you would expect on any compressor pretty much. You've got a couple of different modes that you can switch between. It'll actually show you a lot more information about it. In RMS mode, the compressor will measure the volume using the root mean square method, which gives an accurate measurement of audio power. Okay. It'll actually, in the manual, it completely displays what these modes are and what they do. But yeah, that's pretty much what the compressor is. So you can compress stuff and then bring it up again. So maybe shorter release. And you would hear this a lot more when there's like a reverb in front of it, for instance. So when you have a reverb in front of it. So that's with the compressor, and this is without. So you can hear how that compressor really brings out the reverb. So that's when I would use a compressor, for instance. Or you could use it when you're making drums and you need to compress the drums. The compressor also has a sidechain input, so you have a sideband here. So if you want to make a sidechain input, you can select on one of your output devices here in the generator section, where it says send to. You can also choose sideband. So if you want to make something, you can basically make a short noise file with a short decay on it, and then you can send that to the sideband, which is then going to be able to be used as a sidechain input for the compressor. So you can actually do that as well. You can do sidechaining within this plugin. So next one is the distortion device. Now this one is one of my favorites. I love this one. This one is so good. Let's drive this up. Let's do a different distortion. Let's try this out on the Reese bass. So this is the Reese bass by itself. And let's set up a glide again. Now let's turn the distortion on. I'm such a big fan of this distortion. It sounds really good. And it's really lightweight as well. So, yeah, pretty straightforward. You've got your drive. Bias is interesting because it kind of offsets the center of the sound. So if you have your sound, there's a center zero crossing line, and this bias will basically offset that center line. So basically creating DC offset. And this will hugely affect how the distortion is going to sound. So with just a little bit of bias, and with a lot more bias, and to the other side, you can hear it just changes the sound. Then we also have this sine. And we have a spread, and what this will do is it'll give the left and right channel a slightly different setting on the distortion, creating a stereo effect. It's pretty subtle. Let's move it all the way up. Oh, aren't we still on mono? Yeah, we are still on mono. I should switch back to stereo. So there you have the stereo effect. Now, it's actually pretty interesting because it still sounded good in mono. So we can make the distortion stereo. Now, like I say, that you have to be careful with that you don't overdo it and that it sounds bad in mono. But to be honest, if we turn this up to 100%, It's very stereo. And now let's turn it to mono. That sounds almost like the original sample again. So that's a great thing, that when you use this and then sum it to mono, it just sounds pretty much like the unaffected sound again. That's very good. That's very helpful. Next up, we've got a filter. Let's just leave the distortion on. Let's open up the filter. So, filter. We can also put this in front of the distortion for some more interesting stuff. So that's pretty straightforward as well. I mean, if you know what a filter does, then that is pretty much it. It filters the sound. You got a low pass, band pass, high pass, then we've got a notch, then we've got a low shelf and a high shelf, and in between we've got a bell. So pretty straightforward. Let's move on. We've got the phaser device, that's also included in this bundle. The phaser is pretty similar to the chorus effect that we talked about earlier, except it just sounds slightly different. A phaser and a chorus are very similar in what they do, they just have a different sound to them. So yeah, again, this would be nice to add maybe a little bit of width, to change the sound of the bass that you're working on, for instance, or any other sound. It's usually one of those effects that I would use very subtly, but sometimes on stuff like synths, if you have like a nice lead synth, then sometimes a pretty heavy phaser can be pretty interesting to do, especially when combined with stuff like distortion. That's when I think chorus and phasers and flanges really shine. So I'm not going to talk too much about this. It has very similar controls. So the cutoff is basically the frequency, the center frequency of the phaser, because a phaser is based on the frequencies. Basically, it goes up and down through the frequency spectrum. The rate will change the speed. The depth is the depth of the phaser, so how much it's going to move back and forth. The order, that is a good one. A high order setting will increase the order of the filters used by the phaser, creating a more pronounced effect with more peaks and throughs. Okay, so when you bring this up, oh yeah, I see it. It's just creating more phaser voices, basically, just making the phaser more exaggerated. So if I bring the mix all the way up, so yeah, you can really hear that effect. So I can make it very subtle. Now it's literally just a single phaser voice. 2. Yeah, so then we start hearing the phasing a bit, but if we go all the way up to 7, you can really hear the effect very well. So, last one for this bundle is the reverb, and the reverb is, well, again, straightforward. If you know what a reverb is, then, well, that's it. I made this brass sound pretty short, so I can display what the reverb is doing. So again, the reverb sounds actually pretty good. Let's make it a bit longer, smaller size, bit more width maybe. Let's see. Mix that back in. And then combine that with maybe the compressor we talked about earlier. To compress the signal. there you have it. That's it for the reverb. Yeah, I think all of this is pretty self-explanatory, right? Decay is how long the reverb takes, dampen is it'll basically roll off some of the high frequencies. The size is the size of the space that we're talking about. So bigger size would create a different sound, whereas the small size would create... It changes the sound of the reverb ever so slightly. And yeah, the width is how wide the reverb is. The early will take care of the early and late reflections, so it'll change how much of the early reflections we hear and how much of the late reflections we hear. Yeah, if we bring this all the way down, we get that, and if I bring it all the way up, we get a more brighter reverb. So again, just subtle stuff, but it's really helpful to make your reverb sound just the way you want. Yeah, it's very simple. It doesn't have that much controls, but it's a pretty good sounding reverb. So that's it for the starter toolbox. Let's move on to the professional toolbox. This one has a lot more effects, so now we really need to start making a hurry. The Bit Crusher. Yeah, so that's what the Bit Crusher does. You can see you can really destroy the sound, make it sound older. This would also be nice to use if you have like a riser and you want to make the riser distort towards the end of the riser. So right at the end, you want to make it go like just distort at the end. You can do that with a Bit Crusher, and you can just automate that. So that's one thing that you could do with that. Next one is the comb filter. Comb filter is also included in this bundle, and I really love the comb filter. Just listen to that sound, it's so good. And the beauty of this is, for instance, if you remember, we had some modulators here. We had the note modulator, so I can connect the note modulator to here and make this basically a tuned comb filter. And I might want to change like what it's doing and where it's positioned. So now we've basically added a comb filter to this. And I can play up and down, but it'll basically tune this frequency along with it. So that's because I set up the note device, and we can make this just tuned to whatever we want. Now we can have a positive or a negative polarity on the comb filter, and we can turn it into a mono or a stereo comb filter. So minus, it just sounds slightly different. On minus, it actually keeps the low end a little bit more. That's something I can hear. I really like the sound of that though. Let's make it stereo. So yeah, that's it, and we've got a mix to mix it back in. Move on to the ensemble device. Now the ensemble device is interesting. This is kind of like a unison device, except that it works as an effect. So it basically adds a couple of voices. So it almost sounds like a unison. It's not exactly the same, but I think under the hood it's kind of like a chorus, but just sounding slightly different. We can choose a couple of different motions. So for instance, a random, which will make those voices move about in a random fashion. We can have symmetric, which makes them move around in a symmetrical fashion. And then we have sine, which makes them, well, follow some kind of a sine wave pattern, I think. Yeah, interesting. It does a different pattern though. We can add up to 16. Let's detune it a lot. Let's listen to what the timpani sounds like through that. Yeah, interesting. So you basically can use that to add more voices to it, and it's a pretty lightweight unison, because it's kind of like a unison, except that it works pretty much as a chorus, I think, under the hood. But it's very lightweight on the CPU, so where a regular unison, where you add like more voices, would most of the time be pretty heavy on the CPU, depending on what kind of patch you have. But it can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. The ensemble device, it's pretty lightweight. I'm already at 16 voices, and I don't see that much happening. Like, we get a bit of a CPU spike, but it's not that bad. It's not like we're getting a huge CPU spike. To be honest, it's almost the same on the CPU meter here at the top. So, nice. Let's move on to the flanger. Flanger is again very similar to the chorus and the phases, so I'm not going to explain too much about that. It sounds again slightly different. So if I move to the re space, this is without. So that's just a re space, and then this is what the flanger is doing. And we can change the depth of the flanger, we can change the speed. And you can kind of see what is happening here, so I can make it move back or forward. I can turn the scrolling off completely, so it's not really moving like that, it's just literally moving like this. So you can kind of hear what it's doing. If I turn it on, we get a completely different effect. So you can kind of see what it's doing, right? So you can create these really interesting effects, and yeah, you can make it move in all kinds of weird ways. You got a feedback as well. So you can really make a very, very heavy chorus or flanger sound. And just mixing it back in. Now again, the flanger also has a spread control, so you can make it very wide if you want, or you can make it really mono. Now we have a very wide kind of flanger effect added to this. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is the Foreman filter. Now the Foreman filter is very cool. There's not much to it. That's pretty much it. It just changes like the Foreman characteristics of the patch, so you can give it like a little bit of an O sound or a U sound or an E sound, something like that. And you can do it for both the low and high frequencies, or you can do it only on the high frequencies, or you can do it only on the lows. pretty much whatever you want. So you can create kind of like formant effects if you want that. Next one would be the frequency shifter. Now this is one I use quite a bit. Now, this one is very cool if we split something up in bands. For instance, let's say I want to have 2 bands going here. So I can create another output device, send that to lane 2, make sure that lane 1 does not send to lane 2 but to lane 3. So now I have lane 1 and lane 2 being exactly the same sound, and then they come together in lane 3. I'm gonna low pass this one, so we're gonna get a sub bass in this one. Like that, and I'm gonna high pass this one so that we get the mid-range in this one, like that. And let's say I wanna frequency shift the mid-range down but keep the sub the same. It's gonna sound shit, but it's something we could do. So now we've basically shifted the mid-range up. But the sub is still in the right key. So you can use that. For instance, sometimes you would do maybe a bit of FM, and that FM would throw off the pitch. You can use this to kind of bring it back to the pitch that it needs to be on. Or you can use this to just create super weird effects. So, let's move on to the next effect, which is the gate device. Now the gate device I don't use a lot, but let's switch to the brass sound. Let's add a little reverb on top of the brass, and let's add the gate after it. So now we can cut the reverb off again with the gate. And I can change the release so that it cuts off a little bit faster. So we can create, like, for instance, a gated snare if we want, or we can gate, in this case, a gated brass sound. I can make this heavier, and it just cuts it off. So if I take the gate off, we get that. Now you will have pretty much all your controls that you have on any gate, I guess. They might be called a little bit different, like tolerance is the range here. So attack and release time, look ahead, and again a sidechain input as well, like you get on most gates. So you can have a sidechain gate. You've got a threshold, which is when it will start gating. The range would be how much it takes it down. So if I wanted to go down only 10 decibels, I set this to about 10 decibels. Or if I wanted to completely turn into silence, you just bring that all the way up. Yeah, and everything else just basically timing settings. So it just changes how long it will wait for it to start going down with this hold setting. And the attack and release are just how quick it starts engaging and how long it takes before it is back at like no gate at all. It's a little bit hard to explain. I just look up the manual of this plugin and there's a lot of more information about all of these single effects. I just don't have the time to go into all of them right now, because otherwise this video might be 2 hours long. I'm gonna do a whole series on sound design with this plugin, so you will see me using a lot more of the effects in those videos. Let's see. After the gate, you will also get a Haas effect. Now, Haas is kind of like a stereo effect. So if I take, let's take the timpani, I guess. No, let's take the brass. I can delay the left and right channel from each other. So that's with no delay, and I can bring that delay up. Now I'm really exaggerating it, but if I want to add a little bit of stereo to a sound, just adding a little bit of that Haas effect will kind of spread the sound out a bit and make it sound a little bit wider. So that's what the Haas effect is doing. It's very subtle, very simple. Then we've got a ladder filter. Now ladder filter is just another type of filter. So it only has a low pass mode. So there's no high pass or band pass or anything like that. It's just a low pass filter, but it has these transistor and diode modes, so you can basically add like a bit of saturation to the filter. If I bring the resonance up, you're really going to hear it a lot better. I don't know, it's a different kind of filter. I don't use this one a lot myself, to be honest. I most of the time just use the other filter. I would have to look this up in the manual to really know what this one is doing under the hood, but selects between transistor ladder and diode ladder filter topologies? Not entirely sure what they mean with that, but yeah, it's just another filter, I guess. So let's see what else we have in this one. We've got the phase distortion. Now, phase distortion is pretty interesting. I don't use it a lot myself, but it can sound pretty cool. So let's go to the respace. To be honest, it doesn't really sound that bad on this particular res. It's an interesting type of distortion. Yeah, I like that. So if you hover over any of these knobs, it'll display you some information in the bottom left of the plugin. Let's move on to the next one, which is the pitch shifter. The pitch shifter is very cool. I can just, for instance, say I want to move this up an octave. And it actually shifts it pretty well. I use this a lot as a separate VST plugin as well when I'm, for instance, when I need like a pitch bend on an audio file. So when I have like an audio file or something and I want to add a pitch bend to it, but just a regular Ableton pitch bend control is not really doing it for me, then this pitch shifter a lot of times sounds very, very good on the sounds that I try it on. So I use this a lot. The grain size is, it's kind of like a granular effect. So the grain size will determine how big of the grain, you gotta see it like this. To be able to pitch it up and down, it's going to split the audio in really small chunks of audio, and these are called grains. Now the grain size will determine how big these chunks are, and that's what it then pitches up and down, and it then can repeat grains if it needs to. Like if you pitch something up, the grains will become shorter, right? Because the pitch becomes higher. So there might be a little gap in between the grains, and then it can kind of just, you know, copy the grain in front of it and repeat it to fill in that gap. So that's what is happening there. And you've got a mix, so you can mix it back in. So let's say I want to pitch it up an octave and mix that in. Not sure why I would want to use that, but it's something you could do. Next up, we have the resonator device. Now, the resonator device is similar to the pitch shifter, except that you set this to a particular frequency, or in this case, a note. So let's say C, which is a perfect fifth on top of F, which is the root note of the bass that I'm playing. And it adds like a C note on top of it. I can also make a C3. Now the only thing is, when I play a C note, it's still going to put a C note on top of it. So what I can do is I can take the MIDI note device, map that to the resonator, and now the resonator is going to be tuned. I might want to bring it up to something else, so let's say... I think it's actually... It's there, and it's tuned, so it moves about with the notes, but you gotta figure out what the right setting here is. So you can hear it now. I would probably set this to C if I want to tune it. That's very, very up there. Let's... So you can hear how we get that like resonator on top of it. We can also switch to a saw wave, or a square wave, sorry. So you can change between saw and square. Now I use this a lot on patches, on basses to change the tone of them, on atmosphere sounds, or on synths, like plucky synths, to give them like an extra tonal kind of layer. There's so many ways how you can use this. So that's it for the resonator. Now we also have in this bundle the reverser. Now reverser, I'm going to display that or showcase that on, I guess, the timpani sound. You can hear what it's doing, right? It creates a reversed thing after a sound, so... A really interesting effect, actually. And I can bring the mix all the way up. If I bring the mix all the way up, we really only hear the reversed sound. So it just reverses the sound on the fly, and you can mix that in. So if you, for instance, are making a piano patch, and you want to make one of those piano patches where you also have these reverse notes in the background that are super reverbed, you could do this, for instance, if you take the piano, put that in a sampler, create two output devices so you can split it. So you can have one going through lane 1, where it's going to have no effects, and then one in lane 2, where you're going to put the reverser on and a reverb combined with it. Then you get like a piano with a reverbed reversed piano on top of it. I mean, you could do that, which is really cool. Let's just do it real quick. So let's do this and put a reverb after that. And you know what? Let's put our pitch shifter before it as well. So I'm also going to pitch this up an octave. Now let's create another output device here. And we're going to send that to lane 2. So now I have this timpani sound being run through lane 1, which is going to lane 3, and then also run through lane 2, where it's first pitched up an octave, then it's reversed, and then there's a reverb being added to it. This is what we get. And I can change the speed of that reverse. So there you have it. It already turned into a very interesting sounding patch. Now we have lane 3 where everything comes together. So here I could, for instance, take that compressor that I talked about earlier and compress this together so we can you know, make it all sound a bit more interesting. Maybe add the limiter as well to control. I'll set that to 0 and just boost the input gain. And maybe put something else on it that we talked about. What else did we talk about? The ensemble, to make it a bit wider. So there you have it. That's really cool. I like that. So let's take all of this out. And let's talk about the last couple of effects, because there's a couple of more that we need to talk about. Ring mod. Ring mod is, well, does that. So it adds like, yeah, how do you call it? That's what it does. And again, this has a frequency as well. So we can make it much more higher pitched. So you can ring mod from a couple of different places. So you can use a sine wave oscillator, you can use low pass noise, you can use band pass noise, you can ring mod it with itself, or you can use the sidechain input. So there's a couple of different ways how you can ring mod a sound. Again, you've got similar controls here, so bias will offset the center of it. Then we've got rectify, which does something really cool. It changes the peaks and the valleys. So especially on the sine wave, you can see what happens. So on the sine wave, that's just a regular sine wave. I can make that, or I can do it like that. So that changes the sound, changes what the ring mod is doing. And then we've got a mix, obviously changes how much of the ring mod we get. We can spread it, so we get a stereo ring mod. And we get the frequency, which obviously changes the frequency of the ring mod effect. And we could tune this as well. So if I take the note device, map that to the frequency, we now get a tuned ring mod. So let's see, what else effects do we have? A couple of more. We got a tape stop effect. I haven't really used this a lot myself, but let's say you have a Reese playing, you can create a tape stop effect. You can kind of hear what is happening, right? If I bring this all the way up. It just creates that effect, and we can change the slope of it as well, which is pretty cool, actually. So if I want to have a little bit of a slower, or a little bit of a quicker drop on the tape stop. So yeah, very cool effect. I don't use it a lot myself, but now I hear it, I think I can actually use it in a couple of places, because it's definitely something that can sound cool. Then we've got a transgate. Transgate does this. So it adds like a pattern on our sound. So if we have a sustained sound, we can add like a pattern on top of it to create like a rhythmic kind of thing. So it's kind of like a gate, but has a rhythm to it. So you've got a bunch of different presets that you can choose from, but obviously you can also make your own. because you can change these things right here, and you can just change stuff in here. I'm not sure if you can actually, how you merge two together. Seeing if I can hold shift or alt or anything like that. I'm not sure about that, but okay, so if you click and drag, you can make one that... Okay. So yeah, you can make like rhythmic patterns out of it, which is really cool. Like if you're making synths or like pads or stuff like that, this would be really nice to add to just give them a bit more of a rhythmic kind of fashion. It adds more modulation. It's something that's really cool. The resolution here will change the speed, obviously. And this will change the timing for the different parts. So now it's more like a plucky kind of shape. I can make this longer if I want. And we get that. I can bring the sustain all the way up. And we still have a bit of release time now. If I bring this release time all the way down, we get a much more abrupt stop on the sounds. And if I bring the attack up, we can hear that every time it starts, it just comes in more gradually. So you can create different effects with that transgate like that. Then we have the last effect of this bundle, the transient shaper. This one is very good. I use this a lot on any percussive kind of sound, actually. So if I have this timpani, let's say I like it, but I want to make it shorter on the end. It's not that easy to hear. Now it'll be easier to hear. So that is without the transient shaper. And now let's add the transient shaper to it. It cuts it a lot shorter, and I can increase the attack to really give the transient a boost. As opposed to this. So yeah, and we have a speed control as well. So we can make it really short or make it a bit longer. We also have clip, which just makes sure that it's not going to exceed 0 dB and just going to clip everything that goes above it. And then we've got this pumping control, which I don't really use a lot, but... Ooh! So I just brought the sustain all the way up and the pump all the way up. That creates a pretty cool effect, actually. So that's it for the transient shaper. That is it for everything from this bundle. Now, there are a couple of more things that you could get. If you get the ultimate toolbox, also called the subscription for $9.99 a month, you will get a couple of more effects and plugins. First of all, you get the disperser effect, which is not part of any of the other bundles, but it's this one. It sounds really weird. Hear that weird extra thing that it creates? So this is without. And this is with. I really don't know how to describe this. It's kind of like an all-pass filter. It just creates a weird effect. But it's a super cool effect as well. It it actually almost adds like a little laser zap at the start of the sound, which is really cool. So that one is included with the subscription. The other one included with the subscription is the Saturator. That's kind of like a distortion that I use a lot myself, actually. I really like this one because it sounds nasty. I use this a lot on like respaces as well. It can sound really good. So like this is without, and then this is with. It just instantly sounds really nice and distorted, and that's because of that fuzz control. So the fuzz really adds like a noisy distortion, and you've got the drive here to get more or less. You can bring the fuzz down if you want less of that noisy distortion. And then there's this stereo turbo thing, which just basically turns the distortion more stereo. But yeah, I really like this one. It's a very good sounding distortion, even though there's not that much controls. The color will change, well, obviously. It will change the balance of the distortion. But I usually keep that all the way down. So, then, there are 2 EQs that you also get with the subscription, with the subscription model. You get 2 EQs, which are the Carve EQ and the Slice EQ. Now they look identical, they just work slightly different. So the Carve EQ, you can go in here and you can carve stuff out, or boost stuff if you want, and I can just keep doing this and it just changes. See, I can just carve things out and move things up and make my bands bigger, do this. See, I can just basically keep moving stuff. There are no points. There are no EQ nodes that I create. Well, they are there, but you don't see them necessarily. You see them when you click this. So you can change all of those nodes. I can select multiple ones. I can move those up. So it's a pretty... well, there's a lot of stuff to it, to this EQ. There's a lot you can do. You can draw your curve. You can... oh, this would show the spectrum. Yeah. Then we have this. What is that? Matches input signal to reference. Oh, you can do EQ matching or something? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, it has a match tool, so you can even do EQ matching to like a different reference. You've got mid-side EQ, you got stereo, you can split it. It's like pretty complete EQ actually, but this is the sculpt tool. That is like the main tool of this EQ. And then you have the slice EQ, which is more like your regular EQ, where you add a low pass or a high pass, where you add a bell and then move that up or down, and where you can change that to, for instance, a notch. And you can add a notch, see? So this is more like how you would expect an EQ to work, whereas the Carve EQ gives you the sculpt tool, which lets you do all these weird kind of things, which can be really, really helpful actually in some instances, some situations. Yeah, I mostly use the Slice EQ if I use the EQs in here, but the Carve EQ is definitely a great addition. So that's it, I think. Yeah, there's a couple of other things that are included with the subscription, but those are not specific to Phase Plant, so I will not talk about them in this video. That's it for this video, and if you are now interested in getting Phase Plant and you want to get Phase Plant with one of the bundles or the subscription, doesn't really matter, you can do that by using the link in the description below this video, and if you do that, you will also help out support my channel. I will actually get a little bit of money from every purchase that you guys make, and thus this will help support my videos on my channel and keep me going to make more and better videos. So if you want to help me out, check that link in the description below this video. I'm going to be doing another video in this series. The next video I think is going to be on the wavetable editor. I really don't use it a lot, so I would have to look it up first and really see what it's all about. But that would be the last video to do for this video series. I think, at least. I think that would be the last video before we actually go into the sound design videos. So that was it for this video. I hope you liked it. If you want to see more of these videos, or if you want to see more about Phase Plant, then subscribe to my channel. I do music production tutorials, and every Friday I do a live music production stream, so you can tune in every Friday at 8 PM Central European Summertime to see me work on drum and bass music live. So if you want to do that, I'll see you upcoming Friday. That was it for this video. If you want to join my Discord server, then check the invite link in the description below this video, or links to all of my social media profiles and to the link that you can use to buy Phase Plant and help support me in the process. That was it for this video, and I'll see you guys again soon. Peace!